Let's have a look at using Desmos.com together to graph some equations. So make sure you've typed in Desmos.com up into the URL bar and you should see this page. We click on Graphing Calculator because that's what we'd like to do, create some graphs. And that will take us to this page, which we're a little bit familiar with. And we can enter equations for our lines. For example, y equals 3x plus 2. And here we have the line represented by that equation, y equals 3x plus 2. Typing in our simple equations is reasonably easy. We've practiced that before. But you've got some trickier equations that you will be working with. So one, for example, that you might be working with is y equals x squared. Now, when we're entering the squared into Desmos, you can either use the little hat key by pressing Shift and then 6, or if you come down here to the keyboard, click Show Keypad, there is a button for that. There's a key for entering in to the power of 2 or to any power. So you would press X and then to the power of 2 key, and that will give us x squared. And so we can see this is the line of the equation y equals x squared. Now we can zoom in and out on this either by pinching the screen if you have a touch screen or by using the plus and minus keys. So we can zoom in to see what's going on really, really small, or we can zoom out to see what it looks like from a long way away. So as we zoom out, we can see here that my graph is continuing on and on and on up to infinity. It continues on and on and on, and you can keep zooming out to see that. We can see that red line continues up and up and up. Now, as we zoom out a really, really long way, this looks like just one vertical line. So it's important to make sure that you're viewing from an appropriate zoom to see what that graph actually looks like. If we consider the equation, instead of y equals x squared, let's type in y equals x cubed. So we come back to our keyboard and we click x, and then instead of to the power of 2, we want any power, so we click a to the power of b button, and we type in 3 because we want x cubed. And that looks to me like a vertical line. Now there might be a trick here. Because we're zoomed out so far, we can't see any of those small features that might be happening within a sort of 1 to 2 x value measurement, because we go up to 5 times 10 to the power of 10, which is 5 with 10 zeros after it. It's a really big number. So we can zoom back in zoom in by pressing the plus key over and over again, or we've got this nifty home key, which takes us back to the default zoom. So when I click on that, I can see it's actually not a straight vertical line at all. It's actually got a curve in it, intersects at 0, and then curves back down this way as well. So if you're viewing these graphs from a strange zoom, you might not be able to see all of their key features. So make sure you zoom in and out a little bit till you can view their key or important features. Other sorts of graphs you might see are an exponential graph, or y equals e to the power of, oh, not 2, we don't want 2 this time, e to the power of x. We can see what that graph looks like here. It intersects the y-axis at the point 0, 1. And then if we come down here, it looks like we touch our x-axis because we have an y coordinate getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it says 0. Now let's use some more detective work here. We're quite zoomed out on this graph. Let's see if it does actually reach 0. So we come down here. You can also zoom in by double clicking next to the graph. That will zoom you in as well. So as I zoom in and in and in, you can see we're actually not touching the x-axis yet. Our y-coordinate is not 0. So let's go on a little bit further. As we move along, oh, it looks like we're touching again. But it tells me that my y-coordinate is 0.0002. So as we zoom in further and further, we can see that even though it looks like we're touching the axis, we never actually are. So we're getting really, really close here, 0.000465. That's very close to 0, but we're not actually touching 0. So this graph, y equals e to the power of x, doesn't actually touch 0. There's no x value we can put in so that the y is equal to 0. That's impossible. Now, once again, we have a strange zoom here. So if we were to go and enter in the next function, let's say an absolute value function, once again, on our keyboard, which we can open up by clicking on the little keyboard, we have an absolute value function here. And we click on that, and let's say we want the absolute value of x. And it doesn't look like that's even on the graph. The reason that is because I have a very strange zoom going on here. So you can either zoom out until you see the line, oh, there it is, or you can just click the home key and it will take you back to the default zoom. And we can see here our equation is mirrored about the y-axis. So you can enter a lot of different functions here. If you're interested, there's also a functions key, and you can enter the trig functions here and the inverse trig functions. We've got some statistics functions, calculating the minimum, the maximum, mean, median, some distribution ones for box plots and dot plots and histograms, and then some miscellaneous functions over here as well that you can use. And we'll have a look at some of these a little bit later. But we can recognize this one. This one means the sum. And so there's a lot of functions hiding in there as well. You also have the ABC keyboard that you can use if you need it, and then you can go back to the letters and numbers keyboard. Some other things you'll see on Desmos is we have this little spanner up here. This has the settings in there. So we can use these settings to turn our axes off if we don't want to see them, or we can turn off the grid, or we can turn off our axis numbers, we can turn off the minor grid lines, the small ones. We can label our axes if we want to, x-axis, and you can see that's come up just down here. We can label our y-axis, maybe this is a frequency graph, and we can see that title comes up here. We can also change the step, which is how far between each of our x coordinates. So let's say I want a step of 1. You can see now we're going up in 1s. My y-axis is still going up in 2, so if I want that to go up in 1s as well, then I can click 1s there, and that will show me every point. Now you can make changes to this. You might want it to go up in 5s, or maybe every half, every 0.5. We can see, we have to zoom in a little bit to see all the 0.5s there, but we've got a lot of different options. You can also manually set the zoom. So if I want my x coordinates, right now they're going from negative 7.6, which is just here, to 5.98, which is the point just over here. And my y coordinates are going from negative 2.378 up to 5.992. So you can set these manually. You might want to go from minus 10 up to 10 in the x direction, and maybe the same in the y direction from minus 10 up to positive 10. So you can set the zoom like that by entering in specific values, and you can always press the home key to go back to the default zoom. So there's lots of different functions and things we can use on Desmos. Have a play and see what you can do.